So, welcome to today's class where we're going to be looking further into leadership and leadership development. We're going to begin by looking at the development of leadership in our own lives, leading ourselves, and then we're going to be looking at it in terms of leading a team and leading to complete tasks. Before we do, let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for that work that you're doing all around us in many areas and places. And thank you for the opportunity for us to work with you in the creative task of building people and groups and churches. We pray now that your hand would be upon us as we study and read and prepare, and that you would equip us more and more, not just with knowledge today, but with ways of learning and understanding that would carry us through many years to come, and in ways in which we might continue to grow in our relationship with you and with others, with understanding of ourselves, and in ways in which we might grow as well. Amen. Let me share some notes as we have a look at today's topic. So we're looking at application today, and we're looking firstly a review and a reminder of the need to continue to grow and develop as leaders. That is, what happens in our lives will be important for the way in which we lead others and we lead a church or a youth group or a music group or a women's group or another group. Leadership development's not merely about acquiring techniques or knowledge, though both are important. It's also about growth and development and formation of ourselves. It's about understanding yourself. That is, what motivates us. And it's worth at times writing down. Each one of us may be motivated by different motivations, and a study format known as the Enneagram is one of the many psychological test models that describes different people and different approaches that people have. And so Enneagram is one of those models that recognize there are different personalities and different areas that challenge different people. I myself tend to be an investigator. And so what motivates me is investigating and researching and gathering information. And when I was pastor, I was interested in researching and gathering information that would help the church. Some people are quite individualist. That is, they go out to achieve for themselves. Some are very strongly achievement driven. They're like sports people who want to achieve, and you put them in charge of a church and they're going to achieve. They're going to build the most dynamic and biggest church ever. I would be wanting to build a church that knows and engages with knowledge. Some people are skeptics and questioning. Other people are enthusiasts. That is, they're enthusiastic about what they're doing rather than thinking so much about what they're doing. Some are driven by their heart and feelings. So there's different personalities with different goals. And it's important to be aware of these. Some are wanting to achieve a great deal, whereas others are more about making peace and relationship one with another. Some are perfectionists, whereas some getting on with the job. So the Enneagram is one psychological study that helps people to understand the diversity and what motivates us. And can I get you to write down now what motivates you? Think about it. What are some of the things that motivate you? And that'll be important in leadership to understand that you have certain things that motivate you, and then what motivates others. It may be different to what motivates you. Some may be wanting peace at all costs. Others may be more like a bull at a gate and they're wanting getting things done at all costs, and it doesn't matter who's in the way. And so some people use animals to describe different personalities. And so there's a number of diagrams that are sometimes used to describe. Some are like a lion, who are out there, to confident. Others are like an owl, a thinker. Others are like a monkey that runs around playfully, wants to interact. Others are like a beaver organizer, highly structured. Some are more like an ox or a cow, slowly plodding along to get things done. Some's like a dog and there's different types of dogs. Some are more like a fox who's quick-witted and street smart. Can you write down now what is an animal that describes the sort of personality that you have? What is the animal that describes your personality type? And some, like the lion, some like the otter, some beaver, some golden retriever. And then there's other diagrams. Another one is some like a lion, some like a squirrel, different diagrams. Here's a larger 16 personality types. We've got some like a dog, some like a dolphin, some like a bear, a fox, an octopus, an owl. So there's different personalities that are part of your team, and it's worth reflecting on what is your personality. Are you quiet or are you noisy? Are you gentle or are you strong like the bull? So it's important that we understand ourselves and our personality and how it fits into our relationship with others and how we understand others' personalities. And everyone has a contribution to make, and everyone, if they were leading, could lead in different ways. Some could lead gently and quietly, others could lead more strongly and powerfully. And one is not necessarily better than the other. And in different situations, you may want different leaders. One of the things we should all be able to do is gather information and knowledge. We should all be able to relate to others. We should all be able to exercise wisdom and judgment. As a leader, you should be able to develop plans, build a team, develop systems of accountability to know how we're going, and then reporting structures, report to significant others. It's important also to be able to not only build yourself, build others, build the team, it's important to build a healthy culture through the things we say and we do. And we spent a lesson looking at culture. Whichever approach we take, we'll face challenges and complexity. Things don't always go well. And recently there was the COVID pandemic and everything was changed. Many people were not able to meet physically. And one of the things that worked very well is that some churches had people who were good with online, and some were able to gather the musicians and they would do some music. And sometimes you only needed one musician to do the music and they could do that online. And then another would do the preaching, and sometimes you only needed one preacher and someone could put it all together and could put it out. Some could actually do online 7 days a week. And so the COVID pandemic, unexpected challenge, and then there were major responses. Some people might be running a church and suddenly your building is gone, sold, no longer available. Again, what's the response? Can you manage the complexities and changes? That's part of the work of a leader. Effective leadership involves also emotional and moral and organizational development and growth. Sometimes a leader is not so effective initially. And I've mentioned before Steve Jobs and Apple, and Steve Jobs and Wozniak. And Steve Jobs met Wozniak, who worked for HP, and Wozniak, he initially had the idea that if you had a screen and if you had a keyboard, you could actually make a computer that you could have sitting on your desk. And he shared that with HP, who made calculators and things. They said no, they couldn't see that working so well, but you go ahead and develop it. He spoke to his friend Steve Jobs, and they made the first Apple computer, and then they gave it away for free. One of the things Wozniak was keen on doing, Steve Wozniak, was he felt share what you know. Steve Jobs said that's not such a good idea. We probably should sell it. And so they made some kits and started to develop the first Apple computers. Unfortunately, Steve Jobs, some say, was a bit of a control person and he wouldn't let go. And so he controlled things. And so after making the computer and things did very well, eventually the Apple computer said, things won't work this way. And they said, goodbye, Steve Jobs. And he lost his job, even though he'd helped build Apple. So goodbye, Steve Jobs. And then he went off and he made another company, which is Pixar, which makes animated. And so that went. So Steve Jobs wasn't good at working with people. He wasn't good at self-understanding. And for 10 years, he spent some time thinking about and learning about himself, thinking about learning about what computers could do. And about 10 years later, Apple said, would you like another go? And he came back and he introduced the iPod, which did music. And then he combined that with a phone and he introduced the iPhone. And he worked a lot better with people. He was totally different now in that he could work with people. He could also work with technology. He knew a lot more about technology. He also knew a lot more about tasks and planning. He'd learnt a lot in 10 years, and he was an amazing leader that Apple grew to a very powerful computer business. And so it's interesting to compare the young Steve Jobs, who wasn't so good with people, wasn't so good with everything that was needed. The young Steve Wozniak, who was brilliant with putting things together. And then 10 years later, Steve Jobs was brilliant at designing. Steve Wozniak was able to help, and we have something that develops. It shows that development takes place. And yesterday we talked a lot about development of the person, and also development of skills and knowledge, including relational skills and also other skills as well. And so it's important to grow. And yesterday we looked at how every 5 years you're developing and growing, developing and growing. And are you developing and growing well? So learning is important from books, and we're doing some of that over the last 3 years. Learning from other people is important, and even today I had opportunity to meet with someone that I was learning from. Learning from a course can be very good. Often, if you do something alone, you don't move so well through the learning. But if you've got a course where it's set up, they make you learn more and more. And have you noticed over the last 9 days how every day we learn something more, which would be harder if we were just reading books? Learning to evaluate the material. And I've encouraged you not just to accept what you learn, but to go to scholarly articles. And I've introduced you again and again to Google Scholar and said, check, what are the scholars saying? Evaluate what is happening, think about it, and self-correct, test ideas, develop these skills in evaluating and test ideas. Develop skills in looking for evidence. And in Google Scholar articles, there can be resources that help you. And then there are theories. And so we went to a number of scholars over the last 2 days. So Robert Kegan was another in his development theories. And so we looked at some of the ideas of Robert Kegan, development theories as to how we grow and develop. And so we gave some thought about how over time we develop in our mind and we develop in our skills. And so he was one of the theorists that we considered. And Robert Kegan's model says initially there's people around us, and then we start to develop greater skills and journey on. So there's a few models and ideas that we gain from Robert Kegan. James Fowler proposes a model of faith development, and his model of stages of faith is very valuable for helping us to understand the series of stages through which our faith goes. Initially, we have childlike faith. We accept everything that's said. And then we begin to think more deeply about the nature of ideas. And in teenage years, we ask more questions. And then we realize we need to follow what other leaders and church leaders say. And so we fit in with what people say, age 15 to 20 to 25. And then we reflect more deeply as we reach age 25, 30, and we start to think, how's my faith really developing? And then as we reach age 35, 40, we become aware of a range of different perspectives, and then we become aware of the huge questions and challenges that are out there. And so James Fowler introduces us to these stages of development. We talked about emotional development, and Daniel Goleman and others talk about emotional intelligence, and we looked at some of the different models that help us to understand the different emotional intelligence skills of empathy, feeling for people and understanding where people are at, understanding others. Social skills, understanding ways we relate to one another. And every year of your life, you can be practicing and developing in social skills and how we relate to one another. Understanding self and self-regulation and motivation and the many other aspects of the self. And that was Daniel Goleman. And each of these scholars can help us to better understand different ways of growing and developing. Peter Senge gives us insights into how systems all work together. And so his teaching on systems all working together can be very valuable, and the need for a shared vision, the need for mental models, the need for teams, the need for systems, all to be working together were great insights from Peter Senge. So each of your assignments each day, I've encouraged you to interact with 3 scholars and to work with them. And over the week or 2, I've encouraged you to think about developing in your spirit and developing in your head and in your heart and emotions and in your doing and skills and organizational skills in particular. So practical leadership formation engages all aspects of our person and life as we develop every area of our life. In the first 2 or 3 days, we talked about growing in self-understanding, and we encouraged reflective self-examination. So take a moment now to write down what motivates you. So firstly, what motivates you? For me, it's learning. I love learning. Others, it can be going out and meeting people, and I quite like that. Social is quite valuable and important. Doing can be important as well. Accomplishment of tasks can be another. So what motivates you? Think about the things that motivate you. Music a little bit for me, art a little bit, writing a little bit. So there's different things that motivate us. What about the fears? What fears drive you? I think I'm quite cautious. Anyone else cautious like me? Is that right, Debbie? Am I cautious? So I think I'm not always as adventurous as I could. Recently, my friends climbed trees, huge distance up in trees. I was cautious. What gives you energy? Each one of us are energized by different things. Sometimes meeting with people, though I think more study tends to energize me. And the opposite of this, what drains you? Can you think about what drains you? And I do think social interactions, I put in half an hour, but possibly I'm less of a social person than some. What values guide your choice? So some people highly valued by compassion and giving and generosity, others highly motivated by truth and what is true. So what are the values that guide you? How do you respond under stress? So when things are challenging, what is your response? I've learnt strategies so that I will often take some time aside. Music, I'll put on some Christian music. Prayer, I take time with prayer. I go to the Psalms in the Bible. I go to the Bible. So these are some strategies that I respond to under stress. I know that one of the most dangerous things, if you feel stress and anger, reaction can be dangerous. So we have to be careful not to react too quickly. Um, and how do others experience me? And so over time, people have said that I am encouraging. And so there are aspects of what others say. Some of the ways I've come to understand myself over time have been through keeping a journal. And at one stage, every day, I would write something down. And over a week, I would gather reflections in my journal. I enjoy reflective conversations where I listen and then I share. And this morning I was talking to another church pastor, church planter, and we were talking about what works in planting churches. And he was sharing with me, I was sharing with him. Reflective conversations. Mentoring. There are key people that I like to spend time with who share their expertise. They've gone further than me. And yesterday I was listening to a mentor who was able to speak to me. Personality assessment. There are online personality assessment tools, and you could do some of these personality assessment inventories or tools, and some of these are free and some of them you can pay for. You've got to watch out because some of them you'll find they say they're free and then at the end they actually charge you. So there are some of these personality inventories and I've tried some of them and some of them are very good and they are truly free. And there are others that say they're free and then they want your email, and when you give them their email, they want some money or whatever. And I'm very cautious of those. Spiritual reflection. I often walk and talk to God and pray, and God speaks. And so I find that very valuable. Feedback. I'm open to feedback. I encourage feedback. And if you've got feedback you would like to share, I'm open to that as well. I reflect on my life story and occasionally I write out my life story, 0 to 5 years, my parents, my grandparents, and even today, someone was asking about that. And then I have from 5 to 12 primary school, and then from 12 through to 16 high school. And so there's learning each stage as I go on. I was fortunate to be able to do university studies, and so there's certain challenges there. At university, people tempt you. People offer you alcohol, and you have to make a decision as to what happens. Fortunately, I joined a good Christian group that encouraged me to make good decisions. And so there are challenges at university, but there are also learning that takes place. But there are crazy people at universities. And then I fortunately was part of a good Christian group, and I helped do things to reach others for Jesus while I was at university. And then I became a school teacher. And so in teaching, there's challenges. And then I became a church pastor. And in being a church pastor, there can be challenges. And then I became a teacher of pastors. And so each step, God was working in my life, and I do take time to reflect on my life journey, and I encourage you to do the same. It's a great exercise. Now, let's briefly have a look at a model called the Joe Harry window that helps us to understand ourselves. So I'll get you to write down the Johari window, and the Johari window has four aspects of the way we see things. So there are those things that you know and that others know, and we're quite open about. If you're well organized, people will see that you're well organized. So I've got some books organized behind me. I know that I have an interest in Old Testament, New Testament, and other areas, and some of this is well organized. And some of it's not so well organised. So I know that as well. And others would tell me there are some areas that I'm not as well organised. People have said that I'm hardworking. And so often I will get up early in the morning, and I will work hard for maybe 3 hours working, even before I start work. When I was working for 8 hours as a pastor, I would often get up and work 3 hours before I did my 8 hours work, which is actually 10 or 11 hours work that I'm doing each day. So there are aspects that I know about myself and that others know about me. And you could write down what are areas that you know about yourself and that others know. So in the Johari window, if we were to draw a diagram of the Johari window, firstly, there is across the top, know about yourself. And then over on the other side, there is not known to self, things that you don't know about yourself. And then down the next side, there is known to others know. And so there are areas that others know. And then there are areas that others do not know. And so there are things that you know and others know, and they go here. So both you and others know. And then there are things that only you know, others don't know. And then over here on the right-hand side, there are things that others know and you do not know. And there are things that you don't know. And so there are maybe aspects of yourself that others know about you, but you don't know. And then there are some things that others and you don't know over here. So there are things that you don't know and others don't know. So that's called the Johari window. And this reminds us that there's areas that are open to everyone. And then there are areas that are more hidden. And so there could be aspects in our life that we know, but others don't know. So some fears here, I think, are probably there. And so there could be fears. And so I have a fear of heights, maybe, and different things. So there are areas there that We know more than others know. And then there's blind spots. And so, what are the blind spots in your life that you feel confident about, but others say you're not so good at that? And I guess there are things that one might try, but you're not so good at as well. That's called the J. Harry window. And that's a great little model and insight. We could spend a bit of time talking about emotional intelligence and other aspects of the self as well, and that could be useful. Um, Now, one of the other areas that we need to look at is understanding emotions. And so we spent a day looking at understanding emotions, and I introduced Plutnik emotions wheel. And it's worth reflecting on what are the things that trigger different emotions in our life. And so there are some things that trigger different emotions, and um, some things trigger joy. And this can be slightly different for some. Some find that sport brings joy, dancing brings joy, music brings joy. God builds into your life aspects of celebration that are joyful, and um, there is part of our mind then speaks and reminds us and declares this is something that is of value to you. And in life, we learn those things that give us joy and anticipation. We also learn those things that we can trust and that are valuable. And this can vary over time. We may find that we have a certain type of music we find joy in, and that can vary over time. But there are the more negative aspects of emotion, and they're important as well. Recognize what is it, each one of us is different, that makes us angry or sad or fearful. These are important God given emotions as well. So be aware of emotions and how we are all a bit different in our emotions. So developing emotional skills involves developing self-awareness skills, recognizing one's emotional state, and particularly developing self-regulation skills where you learn to control your emotions. Often, initially, there might be times where we control our emotions less, and then over time, we learn to control our emotions more. We have to also develop strategies, and one good strategy is to wait, but how long? Some people simply give up and do not respond. And so that's one way of responding to conflict. And so conflict can be handled in a number of different ways, and it can be useful to develop a better understanding of when a conflict comes up, we can think about our emotional response. And there's 5 strategies that Harvard Business School list as responses to conflict. One of the first strategies is avoidance. So let's say someone says something, we want to change the music, we want to change the way churches run, we want to change the time we meet, and we feel we are not happy with that. We disagree. One response is to avoid conflict. So, can I get you to write down 5 strategies to respond to conflict? So, 5 common strategies. and approaches to respond to conflict. And then the first one is avoiding. And if the goal is not so important, and so the time we meet is not so important, then we simply leave that with God and with the people, and we avoid wrestling with the question. So avoidance can be a useful response. So if you've not written down already, write down conflict resolution, 5 common strategies or approaches. And the first one is avoid. And sometimes if there's a challenge, avoid. So that can be a good strategy. Not necessarily the best. Another is the competing strategy. And in the competing strategy, someone wants to lead a youth group. Someone else also wants to lead the youth group. Competition takes place. And you might say, well, I feel I could do a good job of leading the youth group. And the other person says, I feel I could do an even better job. And so we see competition, 2 views there. Someone says, I think it's important that we meet at 5 o'clock. And you think, no, we need to meet at 6 o'clock. And so there are 2 views, and you say, this is the view I want. So competition. The danger with competition is that you can lose relationship. So if you push hard, the other person can feel disappointed. Be careful about what you say. Be caring and kind. There is a way in competition to be careful and kind. And we can say, I value your viewpoint. 5 o'clock has many merits, and I can see reasons why you support that. At the same time, I can also see some reasons why we should consider 6 o'clock. And so you present your case in a careful, kind way. It's competition, but it's the way you present the competition that helps to avoid the losing of relationship. Thirdly, there is accommodation, where we, similar to the first one, avoiding, this time we listen and we consider, but a safe way to go is let's not make the change. Let's stay with the same time. Let's accommodate the views that are there. Accommodation. The danger with accommodation is you don't move forward so much. It's a safer way to go. It encourages healthy debate, but then it goes back to this is the way we've done it. Let's stay with that. The fourth way is to talk about the different viewpoints, the reasons for the different viewpoints, and then to think, can we come to a compromise? And so one person says, we want a prayer meeting very early in the morning, 5 or 6 in the morning. The other person says, I sleep in till 7. Can we have the prayer meeting at 8? And so a compromise might be 7:30. So it's a middle point. Some have said that a compromise is a lose-lose strategy. That is, you're not getting your early time, they're not getting their late time, we're both losing. But it brings us to a midpoint. And compromise is often one of the best solutions. And I value compromise as a way to go forward. It requires big thinking about all that's involved and all possible solutions. It requires swallowing your pride. You don't just push for your way. It recognizes that you can't get all of your wants and needs met and fulfilled. The benefits are you and the other party can come together in relationship, both make some sacrifices and go forward. And then fifthly, collaboration, where you can both win. So if you see a person who's not so good at something, that is not getting up at 5 o'clock, but you say, I could knock on your door, there could be a reminder, there could be a collaboration in which you both work together, in which you both say, you're good at this, I'm good at that, you're good at the preaching, I'm good at the music. We come together, and the combination, the collaboration brings a win-win situation where both people work together and win. We can't avoid conflict. It's inevitable. But we can come up with strategies that can help to resolve the conflicts in healthy ways so that there can be a win-win. So Harvard Business School, strategies for resolving conflict. Recognize that most important is good communication skills. That is saying, well, let's firstly be open to one another's viewpoints. So I'd like to share just for 1 minute on what I'm saying and thinking. But before I do, could you just take just 1 minute to share what your thoughts are and your reasons? So good communication, listening, openness is important. Recognizing different viewpoints and values is important. Recognizing different personalities. And so recognize the other person, they may be more relational, outgoing, they may be more driven by certain goals. Recognize also different biases and stereotypes. Can I get you now to write down some strategies that you would use in conflict resolution? Can I get you to write down 5 strategies that you could use in conflict resolution? So you've got a conflict, and some people want to hold a meeting somewhere. You want to do something different. You've got your reasons, they've got their reasons. What are some strategies that you could use to resolve that conflict and come up with the best solution? So let me get you to take a couple of minutes to write down 5 strategies to use in conflict resolution. E.g., different types of meeting. You've got a view, they've got a view. And when you've written that down, can I get you to turn to some others and say, these are the strategies that I think are best in conflict resolution. So share with one another. Share what you think are good strategies for conflict resolution. So write them down and then share with another person.
Qualche mo मात्र थियो मलाई पनि दिदीहरुलाई म अब सुते गरौ यो पनि अगाडि मेजर यो पनि अगाडि के भन्नु चढेको सबै छ पुगेको सबै The 5 strategies that you could use in conflict solutions. Conflict solution गर्ने मान्छे चाहिँ के तरिका चाहिँ के strategy चाहिँ तपाईहरुसँग राम्रो हुन्छ नि त्यो पनि एउटा बेस्ट त्यो चाहिँ फर्स्ट प्रायोरिटी हो मिटिङहरु चाहिँ अलि लास्टतिर आउँछ एक्जाम्पलमा चाहिँ तपाईले मिटिङ राख्नु पर्यो अब के गर्नुहुन्छ सुरुमाकै प्लान गर्नु सुरुले खतम गरे अझ मलाई यसो खतम ए या वर्क फेस रेडी त्यो सिकाएको सुइनाहरु पर्छ त्यो चाहिँ राम्रो नि Yeah, maybe yeah, that's a good reason. Yeah, like this. You were so amazing. It's also yeah, yeah.
That's good.
Bir beklersin. Beklenmez zaten. Ben de var. Profil tutmak da zaman lazım. Bir var bir
Yes. Sitting deep. Is there?
alıyorum.
So thank you, each one. Let's take our break for 10 minutes now. We'll come back in 10 minutes and have a look further at developing practical skills in leadership, including, as we mentioned, conflict management and including other practical skills. Tomorrow, we're going to give you a bigger task to do. And so rather than meeting and so on, I'll tell you after the break a bit more about what tomorrow's task is about. And so tomorrow you'll have a bigger project to do. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But one of the things we want to start doing now is developing overall models to help us to be better leaders. And they include developing yourself as a leader and also developing your skills and developing your organizational skills, your communication skills. And we've just introduced now some insights into conflict resolution, which is another important skill. But let's take our 10-minute break now, and I'll see you in 10 minutes' time. So thank you, each one. Thank you for the excellent work you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your.
Just put